The collective is what happens when individual patterns synchronize, when your signal becomes my signal, becomes everyone's signal. And the most important thing about the collective, most people don't realize you're inside of it. They think they're making independent decisions. Everything we just explored in the context of Wall Street, the same structure is operating in every system designed to move you. Every advertisement that makes you feel something before you think about it, that's the signal. Welcome to What's Your Code, a space where we pause the reaction, read the pattern, and trace the belief shaping your reality. Because what keeps repeating isn't random, it's code. Wall Street. When most people hear those words, they think of numbers, charts, algorithms, analysts in suits making calculated decisions, trillions of dollars moving based on data, strategy, and logic. But what if I told you that the most powerful force moving the global financial market has nothing to do with logic? What if the same things running underneath your decisions, the pattern you may not even see, is the same thing running underneath the entire stock market? Not data, not strategy, but emotion. In the last episode, we looked at the pattern running inside of you. Signal, pattern, identity. The way an emotion arrives, a response forms, and over time, that response starts to feel like who you are. And today I want to show you what happens when that pattern doesn't just run inside one person. What happens when it runs through millions of people at the same time? Because the pattern doesn't disappear when it scales up. It amplifies. And once you see it at that scale, you can't unsee it anywhere. Wall Street wasn't created to be emotional. It was designed as a system of order, a marketplace, a way to exchange value, and it goes all the way back to 1792, when 24 brokers standing underneath the bottomwood tree on Wall Street signed an agreement to trade stocks and bonds among themselves. Price discovery, capital allocation, risk assessment. On paper, it's one of the most rational systems ever designed. And over 2 centuries, we've added layers of rationality on top of it. Algorithms that execute trades in fractions of a second. Models that calculate risk across thousands of variables. Regulations built to prevent exactly the kind of chaos that keeps happening anyways. Now, what emerged? Fear, greed, hope, denial, panic, euphoria. The system didn't fail. Human nature revealed itself through it. And that is the first thing I want you to hold today. We can build something perfectly rational, but an emotion will still find a way to move through it. That's not a flaw in the system. That is what the system is showing us about ourselves. Let me take you back to a moment most of us remember. February 2020. The S&P 500, one of the main ways we measure how the overall stock market is doing, was at an all-time high. Markets had been climbing for over a decade, and most people felt the same thing. This is stable. This is how things are. And then a signal, not a crash, not a collapse, but a headline, a virus spreading overseas. Week 1, what was the reaction? Dismissal. That's over there. Markets dipped a little. They bounced back. They always do. That's the first emotional response, not to the data, but to the feeling. The signal arrived, and the collected first instinct was to minimize it. Now, what happened in week 2? Unease. The headlines kept coming. Travel restrictions, cases outside of Asia. Suddenly, it wasn't over there anymore. The market started to slide. Not because the data had changed dramatically yet, but because the feeling shifted. Now, week 3, fear. Everything started shutting down. Schools, businesses, borders. And the market didn't just drop. It fell off a cliff. The S&P 500 lost 34% of value in just 23 trading days, roughly 5 weeks from February to late March in 2020. To put that in perspective, a line that took 11 years to build collapsed in less than 1 month. In VIX, which measures how much fear and uncertainty is running through the market, sometimes also called the fear index, spiked to over 82, the highest level ever recorded. Not because something fundamentally changed in those 5 weeks, but because the collective emotion reached a tipping point. Now, week 4, panic. Sell everything. People weren't reading earning reports. They were feeling something that overrode every rational strategy they had in place. They were feeling and they acted, not from logic, but from a signal that had already moved through them. And then something shifted. Government stimulus was announced. Emergency money flowing into the economy. The Federal Reserve, the institution that controls the country's money supply, stepped in. A signal of hope entered the system. And within 5 months, the market had fully recovered. Not because the crisis was over. People were still getting sick. Businesses were still closed. But the collective emotion had shifted from fear to hope. And the market followed the feeling. Now, here's what I want you to see: the signal, pattern, and identity. The signal wasn't the virus. The signal was the first moment someone felt something about it. The pattern was the collective emotional response: dismissal, unease, fear, panic, hope. And the identity? That's what the market became. First, it was a crash. Then, it was a recovery. The facts didn't change that fast. The emotion did. The signal, pattern, and the identity. Now let me show you the same pattern, but moving at a completely different speed. 2008. The signals were there for years. Banks were giving loans to people who couldn't afford them. Institutions were borrowing far more than they could back up. And the agencies meant to rate that risk, they were giving perfect scores to investments that were anything but. As early as 2006, people were already losing their homes, unable to keep up with payments on loans probably they shouldn't have been given. But the collective emotion, what was it? Confidence, certainty. This time it's different. The market always goes up. The pattern was moving so slowly that it didn't feel like a pattern. It felt like stability. And then, on September 15 of 2008, Lehman Brothers, one of the oldest and largest investment banks on Wall Street, collapsed. And the feeling that had been building for years, the denial, the overconfidence, the quiet unease that nobody wanted to name, all of it released at once. The S&P 500 lost 57% of its value over 17 months. Not 23 days, 17 months. The slow unraveling of a pattern that had been running long before anyone called it a crisis. The same sequence, the signal, the pattern, and the identity. But here's the difference. When the pattern moves slowly enough, we don't call it a pattern. We call it normal. And that might be the most important thing this episode shares, because some patterns run fast. Your reactions, your impulses, the thing you said before you thought about it. And some patterns run so slowly, you've been living inside them for years without noticing. The speed changes, the structure does not. Now here is where it gets even more interesting. 2020 and 2008, those were reactions. Something happened and the collective moved. But what about when the collective moves before anything happens? Elections. Every election cycle, the market shifts. Stock moves, sectors rise or fall, not based on policy, based on what people believe the outcome will mean. Historically, the VIX, the fear index, rises 2 or 3 months before a major election. And not because anything has changed yet, but because anticipation is an emotion, and the market responds to emotion before it responds to facts. Think about what happened on election night 2016, when the results started coming in differently than expected. Overnight, stocks futures, early indicators of where the market will open the next morning, dropped sharply. Headlines immediately called it a crisis. But the next morning, a full reversal. Same results, the same outcome, but the collective emotion shift from shock to maybe, this might not be that bad. That's not a rational analysis. That's the collective emotional projection. The signal isn't the result. It's the meaning people assign to it before it even happened. And that is worth sitting with because we don't respond to just what's real. We respond to the story we're already running about what's coming in the market and in life. And then there is GameStop. January 2021, a group of everyday investors, regular people, not institutions, mostly on a Reddit forum called Wall Street Beats, started buying stocks that the major Wall Street firm had bet against. On the surface, it looked like a trade, but underneath, it was identity. The stock went from $20 to nearly $500 in less than a month. And when the trading platforms tried to restrict buying, the response wasn't financial. It was emotional, outrage, defiance, solidarity. People held positions they were losing money on, not because the math made sense, but because selling felt like leaving, like betraying the group, like giving up who they had become inside that movement. And they even had a language for it, diamond hands, meaning I hold no matter what. That's not a financial strategy. That is an identity statement. Remember what we explored in the last episode? When a pattern repeats long enough, it stops feeling like something you do, and it starts feeling like something you are. And that is exactly what happened here. The pattern became a collective identity, and the decisions people made weren't coming from strategy. They were coming from belonging. So what are we actually watching when all of this happens? I call it the collective, not just a group of people, not a crowd. The collective is what happens when individual patterns synchronize, when your signal becomes my signal, becomes everyone's signal. And the most important thing about the collective, most people don't realize you're inside of it. They think they're making independent decisions, reading the data, weighing the options, choosing rationally, but the signal already moved through them, and the pattern is already running. You felt it in 2020. When you checked your phone and the headlines changed the way your body felt before you finished reading. You felt it when someone you trust said, I'm selling everything. And something inside you tightened, even when you didn't own a single stock. The collective doesn't announce itself. It moves through you. Before you noticed, you've joined. And if you're thinking, well, this is interesting, but that's Wall Street. That's not my life. Let me bring it closer. Imagine you work at a company. Things are stable. And one day, a whisper starts. Layoffs are coming. No announcement, no email, just a whisper. And watch what happens. Productivity drops. Conversations shift. People start performing loyalty instead of doing their job. Resumes get updated quickly. Trust narrows. No one has been fired yet, but the signal moved through the collective, and the pattern is already running. Same cycle, same code. Not in a trading floor, in your office, in your team, in the room you sit every day. Or think about this. You're scrolling on your phone on a morning when you felt fine. You see a headline, then another, then a post from someone you follow, and that person seems worried. And within 10 minutes, without anything in your life actually changing, your body feels different. Your mood has shifted. You absorbed a signal from the collective without even realizing it. Or think about the last time a product launched and you felt the urgency. Limited time, selling fast, everyone's already in. You weren't responding to a need. You were responding to a signal designed to activate the same emotional sequence we watched move through Wall Street. The fear of missing out, social proof, urgency that isn't yours, but feels like it. Or consider your family. When tension rises in your family, when someone gets sick, the money gets tight, or a decision needs to be made quickly, and you notice how the pattern starts to synchronize. One person's anxiety became another person's control, that became someone else's withdrawal, and within hours, a collective pattern is running that no single person actually started, and no single person seems to be able to stop it. The code runs in the markets, in the workplaces, in your feed, in your family, and every system made of humans. And here's something I want to invite you to start noticing. Everything we just explored in the context of Wall Street, the same structure is operating in every system designed to move you. Every advertisement that makes you feel something before you think about it, that's the signal. Every brand that builds loyalty, not through quality alone, but through identity and belonging, That's the pattern becoming who you are. Every social media algorithm that feeds you content based on what activates you emotionally. That's the collective being shaped one signal at a time. The emotional structure doesn't just run through markets, it runs through marketing, through the way products are launched, movements built, through the way narratives spread. And I want to go deeper into this in future conversations. Because once you can read the pattern, not just in yourself, something starts to change. You start to see the architecture. And when you can see it, you get to choose how to respond to it. But that is a conversation for another day. Today was about seeing the pattern at a scale most of us never look at and asking the question, if it runs there, where else is it running? So here is where I want to leave you, not with an answer, but with a different way of watching. The next time the market drops or a headline shifts the mood of everyone around you, or a rumor moves through your workplace or even your family, notice what happens inside of you first, before the thought, before the opinion, before the strategy. What do you feel? Because that feeling, that's the signal. And the question is, did you choose what came next? Or did the pattern run itself? Here are 3 questions I want you to carry with you after today. When the crowd moves, do you feel pulled? What collective story are you living inside right now that you didn't choose? And what pattern are you feeding, not just in yourself, but in the people around you? Your code doesn't just run inside of you, it runs between us. And when the collective moves, do I move with it? Or do I pause? Thank you for pausing with me. Until our next reflection, notice. What's your code?